Okay, we'll call the meeting of the December 11, 2018 Board of Trustees to order. Roll call.
Jeff.
Jeff here.
John.
Present.
Beth.
Present.
Chris.
Here.
Michael.
Here.
Barbara Jones.
Here.
Barb Bennett and Jared Livingston. Jane's here by phone.
And Jane is on here.
Barb left. You're on the phone. Okay.
Yeah.
I figured it out.
Do I have any additions, corrections, modifications to the agenda?
Are we gonna, I would like to discuss the, one of the handouts we got about the
Strategic
the
plan?
strategic plan. Yeah.
Well, and there's a presentation about that.
Okay, that's what okay, then.
There will be in a moment.
After the presentation or business-wise? Celeste?
I'm sorry.
It's just.
It's one of those, but do we discuss it during? I mean, after the presentation?
I would think that's an appropriate.
Are you staying?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, good, okay.
Okay, approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Yes, we've got it.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We have no executive session tonight. Public comments? Do we have any public that wants to speak? No? Okay. Presentations. We'll start off with our favorite topic,
Yes.
fake news.
Is it working?
Well, not yet.
Not
Sorry.
yet.
Cool,
You
that's
want us-
okay.
The mouse wasn't.
But you're
working on
dependent
the
upon that
password.
too, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
All three of us
both.
are using
So-
it.
And Barbara,
Yes.
yours was password protected, so we weren't.
Oh, I
able
got
to
it. I
access
downloaded
You
it.
did.
Okay.
Never mind.
Oh,
Do other
jeez.
parts of the agenda right
Okay.
now?
Yeah,
While they're
let's
getting it
skip
on?
through to whatever.
Like the consent agenda maybe?
Yes.
Can-
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was working earlier and now it's.
Well, they're
She's involved, isn't it?
Sure, but I mean, maybe
Oh.
we just can move to change the order of the agenda?
Sure.
And maybe do the number 8 and maybe do number 9?
Okay,
with the
let's do that. We're moving down to item number 8, the action items, the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve board meeting minutes of November 13th, payroll of November 23, payroll of December 7, bills for November 16th, and bills for November 30th?
So,
Is there a second to that?
First, there's a new process we learned about from the city, in which with a consent agenda, you ask first, does anyone want to remove anything from the consent agenda? And if someone does, then you remove it. If no one wants to remove anything, then you leave it and you vote on it.
That's the way the city council does it.
They are now. Yeah, there's new information learned, and so
Well-
this is a brand new step
I
that
think
we.
that one we talked about on last Friday, that you just have to do add that extra stuff,
Okay.
ask if anyone wants to make any additions or
Okay,
remove anything.
We've done it for now, and you have to itemize each one, so all those in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay.
Seconded that, I'm sorry.
How are we coming on
I'll
this?
second it if
Okay,
you need a
Michael,
second.
did you? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there was-
yeah.
How are we coming on the computer?
It's going to be another minute, I'm sorry.
not a
It
warm
was
up.
working earlier, and then the
Okay.
touchpad stopped working. So we can't even open the file if we can't get it over the place to click.
Reports, maybe, Jeff,
Well-
if there's any?
Yeah, let's look at the reports. Jeff, do you have anything from Heartland?
No.
No. We're going to fly through this one. Friends, they're not here. Margaret's not here.
They had a book sale, and they raised over $4,000. I don't recall the exact number.
Yay.
But it was over 4 and less than 5.
It was one of the smaller sales, I will say that. But it looked kind of nice coming in because there wasn't books all over the place, under the tables and all that. So I think they got rid of a lot. Foundation. Foundation meeting's tomorrow, isn't it?
Next week. Next week.
So we don't really have anything to report. Okay, moving right along.
You're doing great. Chris, you're doing really great.
Let's take a look at the workplace. Ready?
Okay.
No, if you're ready, we'll.
Okay, looks like it wants to fire up.
Okay.
Ta-da! Yep.
Nice, no time lost.
No, no time lost. Just get things out of the way.
Then you can use the arrow key. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, just come out.
Yeah, that's good.
Barb, this came from a conference you were at, or?
No, I made this, I did this.
Oh, cool. Okay, thanks.
She's our expert on it.
Yes, I just didn't know whether there's something that prompted this, or you just simply just put a whole bunch of things together then.
She's,
You're used to your touching.
Okay, here's what happened. I created these slides. This is about the 10th iteration of a part of a workshop that I originally did when I was at American Library Association several years ago, and it was funded by the Open Society Institute, better known as George Soros' foundation, but let's not tell anybody. But he gave us $1 million. George Soros has been interested in Orwell and in fake news and in the problems of an Orwellian world of fake news for a long time. So he gave ALA $1 million to, well, more like 3/4, but more, to explore the problem of fake news and how to use libraries, and not schools where it's taught a lot, but how to use libraries to teach about information literacy and make fake news part of an information literacy curriculum. So with the funds that we got, we did a program in rural Iowa, in teeny little libraries in rural Iowa. They were wonderful. We had one situation where it was a teeny town, teeny library, and the local newspaper editor came, the radio station came, and actually when they did it in Decorah, Iowa, the high school kids made a presentation to the Rotary. And so what we were trying to do is get the entire community engaged in how to know if news is fake or not. And this was like 7 years ago, so this was now it's a big deal. I mean, Time Magazine, have you all seen that the Person of the Year is the Truth in News? Yeah. So, okay, so what happened, I'll go through this quickly, and it'll only take about 10 more minutes, is after I left, we did programs in Iowa, it was a big one, Oak Park Library in Chicago. I did a workshop here. I did a workshop with the Boys and Girls Club kids down here. It was really great. I did, I did it in Paris. I've done it like all over the world. Belgrade, Nigeria, Tokyo, a lot of places. And so it got really involved, and it was really rewarding work. And then the money ran out, and we're like, what do we do now? So I retired, I moved here, and now there's a lot of interest in this, and there's a ton of libraries doing things. So this is just one of many programs now. And Skokie Public Library has a really good one. Drake University Library in Iowa. But I came here, and the League of Women Voters is very interested in this, plus the Rotary Club is very interested in this topic. And so I went to the League of Women Voters, and they gave me $3,000 to upgrade the slides. And if anybody knows Carlton Brewitt here in town, he's a designer. He did these, and he's such a good designer. I worked with Carlton for years when I used to live here, this is the third time. Okay, what I'm going to do today is go through these. The idea that the League of Women Voters wants to do, and that this library could do, anybody could do, is we want to take these slides around rural Champaign County to the Elks Club, to church groups, to whoever wants us to do a program, Rotary, anybody who wants us to do programs, to try to get people engaged in how to tell whether the news is true or false. And so I'm going to go through these very quickly because there's an hour worth of slides, and I use, depending on the group, no, I'm not, don't worry. Depending on the group, I use different slides. You'll see when I go. So some I'm going to go through real quick, and I'll just say, these are what I use if I'm in a church group, or these are what I use in Rotary Club, or something like that. So, and also the age of the person. If it's an adult group, if it's a high school group, I can adapt this. And the League of Women Voters, I presented for them. They gave me feedback, and they're now gonna, I hope, give me money to revise these, and then we'll take it on the road. And what we want to do is train some other people to take it on the road. So maybe librarians here, maybe librarians in rural areas, what have you, because I don't want to do this the rest of my life. I'm happy to help people. The other person who's really into this big time is Nicole Cook, who is a professor at the iSchool. And Nicole has been on Nyla Boodoo's show to talk about this program, and Nicole has written a book called Fake News. Okay, so what I would start and say, this is News Know-How. Tonight we're going to tell you how to get news you can trust. Just do your homework at your workplace, when you're just for recreational use of the news, and for community work. And then I would acknowledge the people who helped with this, the Urbana Free Library, because it gave me a lot of input when I did a presentation. These are people who have funded this in various ways, including the Mortensen Center. They gave me some travel money. So these are some of the people who have helped. And then I would talk about truth decay. And I don't have to go through this, but I just do a summary about what we're getting from the news and not getting. And I do make the point that fake news can be life-threatening. If you talk about medical care, for example, if you get bad information about that, it can be life-threatening, and authoritarian governments use truth decay to create unrest and division. Then I do an example, which I won't do tonight because of time, but I have a really good example of a video about the Ebola virus that's fake. And I show the Ebola virus video, and then I have people say, how can you tell this is fake? And what I loved, the kids from the Boys and Girls Club here, when I asked them that, they said, poor production quality. I just got cracked up. You know, it didn't look like NBC or cable news. It wasn't good enough, you know, it was great. So then I say, what do you notice about this news clip? Why do you think it's fake? And then we go through it. Like they said, production quality made it look amateur, and kids are really good at doing this. Then I talk about how you check facts. I make a huge deal about libraries, that libraries are where you can go to check facts and get authoritative information. So, and then what I do is show where the Ebola virus video came from. It came from a group called National Report. And then I show Wikipedia even calls it a fake news site. And so I tell them how to look for that. And then I show some fake news sites. Don't get fooled by these. And then how to check facts. And I talk about PolitiFact. I talk about some reputable places to check facts. And how to find out that this National Report Ebola virus story was fake. And I show all the ways to find that out. And then, okay, so why should I trust CBS News? Why should I trust Reuters or PolitiFact? And then I talk about reputation of companies and of news sources, and talk about that nothing is neutral. But CBS News has a long established reputation with sponsors, and they have a lot of skin in the game to be fact-based. And I talk about places like the New York Times or CNN, where you have to check a fact twice before they release the news. So when you wait for breaking news, CNN, for example, might be a little later because they won't release it till they have 2 confirmations. And I want to say New York Times might need 3, but they need to confirm it. So then I'm trying to think who might be in the audience, because in Iowa, when we did this, a lot of parents came because they didn't trust what we were doing. They figured we were coming from Chicago and that we're liberal and that, you know. So I'm trying to anticipate the kinds of things that some parents might be worried about. So I'm like, oh, it's all fake news. And what I say here is that's a dangerous way to think, because there are good news sources and the library can help you find them. I don't have time to sort through all this stuff, is another thing you hear. Solution, your local library. And I make a big deal about this is what a librarian looks like. I want to get across, some people haven't been into a library for decades. I want to get across that these people, there's a wide diversity of librarians, and they aren't the people with the bun and the glasses who go like this, you know. So I talk about why go to your local library. We protect privacy. You're welcome here. We aren't going to find out if you're undocumented or not. I say you can't beat the price. That libraries subscribe to a lot of news and reliable sources. And I'll talk in a minute about the internet, because if a library has open internet, which I think they should, there are things you need to know about how to use the open internet. So then I talk about code of ethics, how that means that we are ethically bound to provide information from a wide variety of points of view, that if people say, well, they're going to be biased. No, we have to, we're bound by our ethics to try to be even-handed in giving people resources. So then I would have the participants, if we were doing a day-long workshop, go through a news landscape and divide into groups. I would have them talk about how did you receive any family-related news, and where do you get family news? Where do you get local news about local sports? Where do you find out about the corn prices? Where do you find out about the biggest event happening in the United States this week? Where might you find out what's happening in the rest of the world? Where would you find out about Brexit, for example? And what do you learn from this discussion? And then I talk about Shirley Sherrod. This is a great story. I don't have time to tell it, but it's a woman who was fired from the U.S. Department of Agriculture during the Obama administration for a video that was misinterpreted, and she was speaking to the NAACP, and she is accused of not giving white farmers assistance in the state of Georgia when she worked in Georgia. And a couple of white farmers got on CNN and said, that's a lie, that's fake. She gave us money. We saved our family farm because of her. But then I talk about the fact that the fake news got her fired. And okay, I talk about the Los Angeles Times. This was on the front page in 2003 of several big papers. The Hartford Courant was another. And how it is a mashup, that the photo is a mashup, and it gives the wrong impression of what is going on in Iraq in this particular picture. How the photo is mashed and what the impact was. I talk about the fact that the photographer who took this was fired from the Los Angeles Times for unethical behavior. At which point kids go, that's not fair, that's not fair. And we talk about why would you fire somebody for mashing a photo like that. We talk about that. And then we talk about who owns the news. Who owns the News Gazette? Does that have anything to do with their
Bias.
okay, yeah, and stuff. And then I have a class assignment. They have to go through Google, New York Times, Fox, Facebook, NPR, Huffington Post, and who owns it in other countries? Where does the government own it? Where is it owned by the people? Where is it, different things. So then we do examples. We talk about social media, which is a real problem, and because we try to go through and show how you can tell on social media what's a fact and what's opinion. Studies show that kids, and adults too, do not know the difference between an editorial, an opinion piece, and a reported piece. They just don't know anymore. And it's partly because of the physical makeup of a social media or a page from CNN or the New York Times. Talk about the First Amendment, barriers to getting the news. Then, where do I check facts? And this is probably the most important slide of the things that this is from the International Association of Libraries. And this is what the International Community of Librarians came up with about source, reading beyond that story to get a context, check who the author is, and you can see. And is it a joke is a big problem, because you get Stephen Colbert and which is good, but it's not always. Although I have to say he's pretty factual, but okay. And then finally, and then I'm done. You can get a News Watchdog certificate, and we've had people go around, like in Belgrade, they have to read a hard copy newspaper and distinguish what's fact, what's opinion, etc. They have to visit a newsroom and talk to people. And by the way, the News Gazette has said they'll do this anytime. So, we could do it. Interview a teacher who teaches civics and what they can tell about news. Then we have the kids pick a controversial topic, like gun control or something, and find 5 sources that provide facts, find 5 sources that are opinions, to try for them to differentiate. And then 5 headlines that show how different sources, all of which are good, still cover the story differently. And then assignment 5, visit your library and talk to a librarian about this. And then design your own news landscape. In other words, Barbara Jones, how are you going to look now for local news, international news, family news? What is your profile? What are you going to do every day? Are you going to read the Wall Street Journal? Are you going to do whatever? And then this is the end. This is Nicole Cook, who is taking over this project from me at some point. So she's at the library school. That's it. I went a little over. I apologize, but
How long is this workshop?
the workshop can be done in a day, or if you do the assignments like the field trips and stuff, it can be done over a series of weeks and once a week. Like the kids in Chicago, like at Oak Park Public Library, they went downtown and went to the Sun-Times and the Chicago Tribune. They went to a television station. By the way, all these media sources are happy to do this. They are just as concerned about the fake news problem as we are. They are more than happy to do this. And so we had no trouble. We got a Sun-Times reporter come to the Chicago Public Library and sit down with a group of kids who didn't read newspapers at all, just read their phone. And he sat with them for a whole morning and talked to them about the news. It was quite heartwarming.
What would your recommendation be for us doing a program in this community? How long?
If it were a Rotary program, I could do it in the Rotary time, but it would be really hard.
I think we're talking about here, maybe.
Here,
And if we
did it at this library or any library, I would, if you do it, what we did in Chicago we did it in the summer. We did most of this as a summer program, like a reading in the summer type of program. So you could do it a little bit every day for a week or whatever. You could do it in a week for like a couple hours every day if you didn't have the visits. If you have the field trips, that adds a whole nother dimension to it.
But I would love it if you had, whatever the program is that's more extended, that you were able to promote it through a 20-minute. So I'm a Kiwanian, which is
good.
sort of like Rotary,
Yes.
only better.
Yes. My dad was.
Sorry,
My dad was a lieutenant
Got
governor.
Rotarians in my family
of
too.
Kiwanis
His
Club. So
you go.
was all Rotarians beside that.
But no, I think a 20-minute presentation would be really useful. And one of my concerns
Happy to do it.
about what we are facing now is a period of time where institutions are being called into question.
Yes.
It's a vigorous attack on institutions.
Yes.
And how, I say this to our daughters, how so many reasonable people are not noticing in the way that I think that they should. And that's a great question as to why that phenomenon has taken place. And I think it is because of what you're describing. And so these service clubs are an institution, and they're being threatened by this. And so I think the more we can get out in places like that where very reasonable people have been kind of sucked in by this, I think it's a good message.
Thank you. And somebody in the League of Women Voters who's ultra conservative and a gun owner and everything, which is fine. I mean, and she said, you've got to get this out to the ultra conservatives in the rural areas where I live, because people have given up. It's not that they're just like, it's all crap. It's all, I don't trust anybody. I don't trust anything. The other thing Nicole's working on, actually, she just got a fellowship at Harvard to study for a whole, to study why people continue to believe fake news even though they're told that it's fake, because there is evidence to show that they will deny that it's a lie. And there's a lot of psychological reasons, and she is going to Harvard to work with the psychologists there to figure out why that is. That's the most depressing part for me, is like, why do this if they're not going to believe it anyway? So,
Bravo.
Nice.
I think the field trips and all add to it because,
they do.
I mean,
yeah.
I'm a news person, but
Yeah.
most people have never been in a newsroom and see all those kind of
Right.
things. And so I think it's got to be over a period of time, I think. And it would have to be field trips and all, I believe.
Yeah.
I was just wondering about sort of adding a couple things, I know it's always bad to add, but to the checklist, one of which is, I don't want to put it in this fancier way to kid, but, is the stuff logically consistent? You know, sometimes people say a bunch
Yeah,
of things,
and
and
things
you don't
that's-
even really have to look at other authorities and say,
That's right.
this
It
this just
yeah.
doesn't, it's not consistent with itself. And the other thing is, does it touch on anything where you actually know directly yourself from your own experience? And I guess part of why I'm trying to emphasize those ultra general techniques is that it can happen that institutions become the source, of we've seen it happen, and there's no guarantee it won't happen here. So you go to the nominally big institutions, and they may be
Yeah.
the source of the crazy stuff themselves. It's happened in big countries before.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's nice to have a little bit outside the look through the authorities.
Okay, I think we probably,
Move on.
I think we're in tune to what needs to be done, and I'm hoping we move in that direction a little bit.
Yeah,
Okay,
Jeff's got something to do.
Jeff, yeah, I'm sorry.
I haven't slept very much, I'm sorry, I nodded off. I was like fascinated with this stuff, but I apologize.
Oh.
Sorry. Well, no, I mean, when I was trying to finish a PhD, my specialty was collective memory, which is like all this stuff, and so when you think like the memory of World War II, nobody experienced World War II, just lots of different people, and so it gets conglomerated by institutions and media and all this sort of stuff. So this whole idea of real or true news and whatnot, it's all made up, but it's like knowing how to interpret it and
How
stuff.
to, sort through it.
But by the way, this is not a new phenomenon. I'm in the last 10% of Hamilton right now, the biography.
Yes, right,
Yes, yes.
Great,
Yes.
great historical reminder that we will survive this, because they survived it then too. And so it's, we really should look at the next 10 years and see how we're going to get through this latest phase. And I love that
In France,
libraries
they
are a great
start
place to do this.
in kindergarten. The French government has the curriculum, a news literacy curriculum that starts in kindergarten. The kids go, what is an apple, what is an orange, what is a banana, how can you tell the difference? I'm serious.
Wow.
I met with them. It's just amazing. Yeah,
Yeah, and see, now you get riots in the streets, so.
yeah, right. See what it creates? Right.
They do know how to do
Celeste,
that.
would you like to introduce our next speaker?
I'm delighted to introduce Amanda Standerford, who is our new Director of Development and Promotion, and she is here to talk to you about the strategic planning process.
Yeah, so thank you. I'm excited to be here to talk about something I really love, strategic planning. So when I'm not here at the library, I own a small business called Fast Forward Libraries, and we mostly do strategic planning consulting. I say we, it's me and the mouse in my pocket, although I do work with some other consultants occasionally. I also do fundraising, consulting, capacity building, all kinds of stuff for libraries all over the Midwest. So I'm excited to be here to talk about Urbana's strategic planning process. So just a little bit of background about my philosophy of how to do strategic planning. Strategic planning is really important for a library because it sets direction. It's a way to have goals and measure success. It's a tool that a library can use to communicate to the public about where they're headed and the things that are important, their priorities, what they want to do during the near future, usually around a 3-year period. Staff also use a strategic plan to inform their annual activity plans, which guides their work on a day-to-day basis. It also helps library administration make decisions about different directions to go. And a plan also includes metrics that you can use to communicate success about what the library is doing. So the plan that we're proposing tonight is to develop a plan that's very usable and graphical. Something that's emerged as a trend in strategic planning is to have a one-page strategic plan. That doesn't mean that's all you have for your strategic plan. The graphical version is really a communication tool. It's something staff can look at and see and connect with when they're in break rooms or look at something on the website. It's something that the community can look at and really understand what's going on at the library. I think this is a trend in our society overall, that people want to see, a graphic and a soundbite, and you need to be able to communicate a lot in that one document. So the graphical one-page plan is something really important as an outcome of this planning process. I use Simon Sinek's Start With Why as kind of the foundation of a planning process. And if you haven't read his book, Start With Why, there's a great TED Talk, which is linked in the document that you have. It's, I think, under 20 minutes, and it's worth watching. But basically, his philosophy is this golden circle, which I have up here on the screen. So you start with why. The why is your vision and mission. That's what you aspire to be in the community and the things that you're going to do to get there. So your vision is something aspirational out there in the future that the community and staff and the board can look at and say, oh yeah, we want to be that for the community. And then your mission is really, okay, so how do we do that? Like, what are the things that we do here at the library to get to that vision? And that's where the board's input's really important in strategic planning, to set that why. That's the North Star. That's the true place where the board can be visionary and set those aspirations for the staff. The next circle is the how, and that's the goals. So once you know your aspirations and your mission, the board can then look at strategic directions and goals that will help you achieve your vision and mission. And then the outer circle, the what, is where your staff is really strong and can look at activities, things that they're going to be doing that meet the goals, that then get to your vision and mission. So everything kind of pulls together, but it really starts with that why and the importance of just thinking about how you inspire people to be involved in the library, the impact that the library wants to have in the community, and the strategic directions that the library is going to follow during the life of the strategic plan. So the process and timeline that we're proposing is pretty abbreviated. It's broken down into 3 phases, and it's guided by a planning team. More about the planning team in just a minute. This maybe isn't as long as some processes that you've been involved in the past. And while this is typical of timelines that I've helped facilitate over the last couple of years, we've also taken into account that Urbana is unique, and we want to make sure to capture all of the different aspects of the community as we work through this process, so we can really assure that this process is grounded in that community data so that the plan is responsive to the community. So each of these phases starts with a planning team meeting, and the planning team, reviews learning that's happened during the process, gives input on activities that are coming up for the next phases of the process, and then make adjustments as needed too. Because while we've laid this out in a very nice, neat 6-month package, things sometimes happen, and the planning team is the one to kind of adjust and see where things are going along the way. So the planning team is there to make sure things are moving along in the process. And again, more about them in a minute. But basically, these are the 3 phases: learn, dream, and do. So learn is really the longest part of the process because you want to gather community input, and we do that through a survey, through focus groups, through community interviews. We're also going to hold a community leaders breakfast. So really looking at all of the different places that we can learn about what people say about the library, that narrative they've maybe developed. What can we understand about that here at the library? What do they want for the community? What do they want from the library? And then at the end of that phase, we put together a learning report, and that synthesizes all of that data that we've gathered in this first phase. We're also in this phase having a staff session because the staff in-service is right in the middle of this phase in February. So the staff will be doing some activities related to just environmental scanning, what strengths do they see emerging, and getting their input kind of initially into the process during that first phase. The board will also do a survey during this phase too. I love to do surveys with boards because you can sit down and look at those questions, nothing too long, but really think about your responses, and that all also goes into that learning report, which informs the next piece, which is dream. And the main thing there is a board retreat. So we plan to do this during a board meeting, ahead of a board meeting. A couple of hours is typically what it takes to review the learning that you've had so far through the learning report, look at vision and mission, think about strategic directions. And again, this is all input that the planning team can go back and synthesize and come back with recommendations to the board. Each department in the library will also meet during this phase to think about activities. So once the board says, okay, here's our 3 or 4 strategic directions, the staff can say, okay, well, what kinds of things would we maybe be doing here? And how do we organize those underneath goals? And what's really achievable and realistic? Finally, the do section is where everything comes together, and this is where the board will meet to review draft documents, kind of give final input into the plan, and the planning team will go back and make final revisions and approve the plan in June. So again, January to June is currently what we're proposing for the timeline. We think we've given plenty of time for each of these phases to move along and for discussion to happen. So let me tell you a little bit about the different folks who are going to be involved in the planning process. And I'm sorry this is a little small on the screen, so I'll tell you what it says. So I've mentioned the planning team a couple of times. They're really the process guides here. Celeste is going to collaborate with Chris to pick the team for board and staff members. We'll pay attention to diversity and the broad ranges of experiences that we have on the board and staff. This team will meet monthly during the planning process, usually for about an hour to, again, where are we at? What have we learned so far? What's next? And how do we give input into shaping that? These are folks that are invested in the success of the library, and they are able to lift up the strengths of the library while being very focused on the future of the library. This team will also help compile the community survey, give input into the questions that will be on the survey. And then also later in the process, there'll be a lot more via email because we'll have lots of drafts and suggestions, and people will need to say, I like this versus this, or how about this word versus this word. The planning team gets to do all of the wordsmithing. The board just gives input, and then the planning team goes and does that really difficult work of looking at which words work for us, which words inspire us, and then come back to the board with recommendations. The community is, of course, very important because that's who we're here to serve, and they have multiple ways that they can input into the plan through the survey, the focus groups, the interviews, and we know that there's a lot of other community stakeholders out there, so we're going to reach out to them to join us for our community leader breakfast. This will include members of the Library Foundation, library friends, other community stakeholders in the group. And if we need to add more community input during this phase, we've definitely accommodated time for doing that. And the planning team would make those adjustments and determinations as we go along. I've talked about the board's role a little bit. The board will do a survey in the beginning phase to give their input into the learning process. And then also spend time during the retreat in the second phase talking about vision, mission, and strategic directions. The board then reviews all the draft documents and approves all of the documents at the end, approves the written plan at the end. And then the staff will be involved again in multiple places during the in-service time, doing an environmental scan, a SOAR analysis, which is a SWOT analysis, but a little bit more positive bent. So it's strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and results for your SOAR analysis. And then the staff will also give input into vision and mission. And then again, department meetings where the staff will talk about activity plans. So in the end, there'll be a full written plan for the board to approve. And then we'll have the graphical versions that we'll use for various communication tools, and then annual activity plans, which will guide the actual work of carrying out and implementing the plan. So that's a very brief overview. I know you have questions from the fuller, more complete report that I gave you, and I'm happy to answer questions.
I first of all want to commend you for putting this together, because I think it gave us some structure to look at. Celeste and I have talked about where we would like to go about selecting the planning team.
Sure.
My biggest concern there is of the board. I don't want you to necessarily volunteer right now, but I want you to come to me and tell me if you would be interested. I look at this 6 months as heavy duty, because it's going to be moving. And I think that's great, because I think the last time, if anything, we drug it out too long. But I do have a concern.
Sure.
I think that the planning team is not totally board and staff.
Okay.
Do you have a response to that?
Well, I, again, feel like the folks on the planning team are doing that heavy lifting. They're guiding the process. I mean, my role is to make it as easy on them as possible too. So as all of this information is coming in, especially during the first phase, my role is to synthesize that and make it easy for them to digest and reflect to manage their meetings so they're making the best use of their time. Again, it is a commitment, and I think folks on the planning team are ones that we want to have really invested in the future and the success of the library, really kind of understand the intimate details of what happens here on a day-to-day basis. I've not worked with a library in the last 2 years that's used anyone other than board and staff. There was actually one outside of Peoria that had a community member who was doing a practicum at the library and had done like a marketing report, so had spent a lot of time at the library. So I definitely understand your concern. I think the community's input happens during the survey and the focus groups because the community is able to give lots and lots of different perspectives. So I would hesitate to pick a specific group or person to include in the planning team itself, because then you almost like, where do you stop? There's so many other folks that you can include.
I agree, and I think that your idea of 7 people is wonderful.
Yeah, and 7 is actually large. I typically work with 5.
Yeah, I'd like to add to Chris's concern a little bit. First of all, I love the report. I love the short and sweet. I love your timeline, everything about it. The first thing when I read that 7, I was thinking community member, community member. We've recently had some issues in this community with transparency, and I just want to make sure in this process that we are very mindful of transparency of our process.
Yeah, so the learning
because
report.
Because of recent events.
Yeah, so the learning report is something that we can put on the website. In fact, we could put the raw data on the website too if we wanted. If anybody wants to see, the SurveyMonkey report, we can put that out there. The planning team, typically, I don't take minutes during the planning team, but that's something that we could do and kind of, have those report outs on what's happening with the planning team. That's something that we'll have to think about a little bit more.
When I read that section, well, my first thought was 7, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Looking at the aggressive timeline that we actually want, I think I've heard as a board that we want to get this rolling because this is,
3 years old.
Yes, exactly.
Short and intense.
But then realistically, if you are trying to accomplish everything we need to do, you want your planning team to be very knowledgeable and very tight and really important, being able to devote that time. And a community member might not be able to fit in that slot as well, but as I was reading it, I don't think this process is going to prevent all that really good input that we're going to need and to show transparency for our process and get all the community input. So I think we are hitting both of those. But yes, we are all sensitive because of the last process. But to get a lot more involvement, it's going to take a lot longer and maybe just come to the same place.
I think we have to have commitment from people to join that team. That would be the basis of it. But I applaud your remark because we've just had an incident in this community that nobody knows what's going on. And that is the worst thing. 3 years ago we went through some of this, and I will not be a party to something that is not transparent 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, this is rotten the way it is right now.
Sure, and I think that's something that, could be first on the agenda for the planning team. How do we make sure we're communicating with the community and the board and the rest of the staff about what's happening in the process?
And when your timeline, the community was brought in.
Well, but they're going to be anyway. I would argue that there's plans for the community involvement. But I think that there needs to be somebody, and I don't know if we can find him or not, but I think there needs to be somebody from the community or we're subject to criticism. Real quick. Anybody else got it? I mean, and you know what I'm basing it on.
I am, but you know what, Chris, the only reason, I'll just maybe disagree because of the way this communication process that I'm already seeing being laid out. I think there's a lot of opportunity for transparency. I think there's a lot of options. meeting minutes might be one option. Maybe you don't always do that, but if there's a place that we put on library website and say,
See, I think we need to, I'm sorry.
no, yeah, but go ahead, Barb.
I was just thinking, it has to be more than putting it on the website, it has to be aggressive, like, we push out, not just asking people to read the
Sure.
website.
Yes.
So, for example, call Smile politely, say, hey, we have a planning process
Oh,
going on.
absolutely.
Please, can we have a reporter talk to us about
Yeah,
this?
luckily, since I'm also in charge of promotion, I've already got that all
Okay.
planned out.
Okay, because, you know, and make sure that the people, some of the people in the community who use this library heavily and who are,
Yes,
we need diversity.
yeah, absolutely.
And find out why they love the library. And make it clear that they've been consulted about
Yes,
what should be going on.
yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, I didn't
No,
mean to
no,
interrupt.
no, it's fine, but I'm just,
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
from reading this, I don't see, I'm not worried about having a lot of negative reaction to this planning process like we harvested from the last time, because I see so many opportunities for good communication. It's all about communication. That's what killed us last time, because how things were done. And I think as long as we're very mindful of communicating often, early,
Yeah.
and then having that very aggressive pulling in of the community members,
Yeah,
I
I
think
think it's got to be
it will
aggressive.
be
Yeah,
successful.
I think that if you look at either the schools or the
Yeah.
library last time, what created justifiably a huge ruckus is not just general lack of interest or lack of communication, but something very major was done.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
And
That's true.
without people knowing about it. So I think it's really important, not necessarily, I mean, I think first, yes, we should focus on how to reach out and part of the list of the community. Getting the list of names and phone numbers and email addresses is really crucial, and the rest of it's kind of words. But, you know, that's really where, but then, once it gets going and we've got input from people, the thing we have to worry about is if we come to the conclusion, hey, we're going to do something really different, really surprising, then we've got to put it in the newspaper
Yeah.
and really let people know, to make sure that people who say, you know, you're insane, have a chance to
Yeah,
tell
right.
us first.
Right.
Other than that, you know, probably, I don't think there's a huge issue of transparency, you know, unless you do something different than the other.
Right. You know, that's another step that I didn't talk about that we can definitely add is doing a round of stakeholder feedback of a draft.
Yes.
So people
Yes.
come to the
That
committee,
sounds great.
breakfast,
Oh, I think
taking
we-
a group of
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
That's good, Dave.
Another thought about process, that in terms of making things sort of shorter and more efficient,
Yeah.
we actually have a library that's pretty good now, and
Yeah.
people are pretty happy with. So I think one way of thinking about it is not, well, we have to sit down and design a library. We have to think about
That's right.
what changes are needed.
Yes.
You know, just, okay, we're here, what little, and part of the problem last time is that there was this plan written down, and nobody said, this is the little correction direction we want to make, or this is the direction we want to be all together. So nobody knew whether we were supposed to
Right.
throw out all the books or not.
Right.
And so, you know, being very clear that as far as we know at this stage, we're talking about incremental changes
Yeah.
in one direction or another.
Well, it's very strengths-based, and that's another piece of the philosophy that I read more about in the introduction there that I didn't talk about. But the goal is to look at what are we doing really, really well, and how can we amplify that? Because it's not about convincing people that are never going to come into the library to come into the library. Certainly, you want those folks to come into the library eventually, but if you're doing really cool stuff and you make it even cooler, those folks are going to notice and come along naturally.
There's a part of this process, this also ends up being a PR opportunity.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes, for
Yeah.
sure. Because again, especially with the graphics, you can very clearly communicate, this is what we're all about here at Urbana Free Library. Don't you want to be part of this too?
I think one of your strengths is the one pager or short,
Yeah.
not necessarily one page, but we all have served on these strategic plans,
Sure.
and they get stuck in a file cabinet and never looked at.
Never looked at
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
So I would say if we would only make 4 decisions that might be worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think, I take it from here, we're not that bad off.
No.
But it's required for us to do this.
Yes.
Yeah.
And by the way, I looked at here, so we are required as a
Yes,
board
it's true.
to do this. So I think that, but I'm still stuck on, because of what has happened at the schools. I think that unless we can, if we can't find anybody, but I want us to look for a community member that is not necessarily, because we've got invested interests. The staff and us
Sure.
are working together every day, and the staff has theirs to keep their job, and we have to keep them. So we've got invested interest, and I'm very prone to want to see if we can find one community person. And I appreciate your idea that we must have some race issues, because this town has them.
How would it work if there was a group right below the planning group that were stakeholders that we could give feedback to very easily, that included community stakeholders? Just an idea.
Sure.
I mean, I too, I'm just really concerned about,
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, I worry a little bit that that slows things down. I think there's two places where that might work, and that's one, when you have your learning report. And I wish I'd brought an example of one so you could see what I'm talking about. Because it's, 15 pages or so of the survey results, of comments that people have made, all of that stuff. And to give that to a group of community stakeholders and to be able to say, these are reflections that we heard in the groups that we came to, or, that we know about the library, that might be valuable. Just again, to kind of affirm that you're going on the right direction.
Yeah.
And then again, at the point where you have drafts later on in the due phase, to say again, like, oh yeah, we read your learning report. These are things that emerged, and here's your plan. And oh, gee, that's reflective. And one of the things, Chris and Michael also, there are a lot of great things going on here. Part of the planning process is actually kind of to organize those in those strategic buckets to be able to say, oh yeah, this is why we do this, because it helps us achieve this. And so all of those things are happening now and good going on, but the plan will help us organize and measure those things.
How does Parks and Recreation do it? They gave a report last month, and
Yeah.
I can't remember what their planning group looked like. How did they involve the community?
They had like heroes or something, they said, like certain people that they brought out as being representative of the
Were they
community.
part of that planning team?
It was
That's where I'm
really
at.
very much not
No.
big committee organization.
Right.
It was
I
like,
think-
get 6 phone numbers with the right people,
Yeah.
and that sort
Okay.
of thing, and keep going that way. And, friend of friend, second cousin,
Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
whatever.
Because they seem to have hit the nail on the head. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the feeling I got.
I don't pretend to understand all of the reasons for why we've had such a problem with the school district, but I think even those who are kind of on the outside can, I think, agree that there's a perception problem, and you sort of build from there. I don't know whether it's because they didn't have more community members who were serving in the process. I don't know whether, I've heard what the president of the school board has said, and heard what staff leadership has said, and I'm not exactly sure who is more responsible, but I know at a minimum it's a perception issue. I think it's important that you understand why we're so concerned.
Sensitive right now.
Yeah, no, I do.
And personally, I would be very deferential to you, because part of this is not an easy thing to manage. Even from a staff standpoint, it's not an easy thing to manage. And I don't want to overreact. I want to be sensitive, but I don't want to overreact based on what I just don't know the details as to why it hasn't worked so well there.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I would be very open
Yeah.
to your suggestions about it, and zero in on making sure that the perception of our process is positive, and as has been said, make it a real positive
Can you define for us
communication
what your role is?
message.
Sure. Right, so I serve at the pleasure of the planning team. I'm there to make their lives easier, to make sure things are getting done, people are being communicated with, people are up to speed on what they need to be up to speed on. So I'm not a member of the planning team, and I'm not the leader.
No, you're the facilitator.
Facilitator, yes. And the planning team then are
Very essential.
facilitators one step beyond me too, because they're facilitating, making sure the process goes forward. I'm making sure the planning team goes forward. So, I don't have a strong opinion one way or another. Again, I've only worked with one library in 2 years that have used a community member. I've worked with a lot of other nonprofits previously. I had kind of a gap in my consulting work. I was required by a previous employer to set aside my work for a time. So there were about a 3-year gap where I didn't work with any folks. But before that, I worked with a lot of nonprofits and smaller libraries. And again, it was mostly kind of internally led because those were like the true stakeholders of the outcome of the planning process. But I can work with anybody. Again, I serve at the pleasure of the planning team and the board.
I probably missed it someplace, and I didn't ask you, Celeste, beforehand. How long is your commitment with us?
Oh,
She's a
the
full-time employee.
development.
She's an employee?
She's a
Yes.
employee, yes.
I didn't know that.
So I'm doing this as part of my regular duties.
Okay.
So you're doing
Right, this is
strategic
developer,
planning, you're doing
foundations
public
and
relations, and you're doing
planning.
development.
Really just-
So at least 3 things. Anything else? Maybe by the end of the night, you'll have,
I'm happy to do it.
So here's, as I see one of the benefits, if I can interject and support what I'm hearing, having someone who is an expert in a planning process is a benefit. Amanda is a professional consultant and is got that consulting experience and got the depth of experience from working with many different places. We also have the benefit of Amanda as staff. She's one of us. She's got skin in the game in this community. And so this is one of the reasons we were so excited for her to work with us, is because we have the best of both worlds and being able to take her experience and then customizing it to the Urbana experience. So we are excited to have expertise and the uniqueness of Urbana and the flavor that we need to have here. Would it be okay if we, I'm not sure what else other people want to contribute, but what I want to do is make sure that we can catch all the pieces, we'll watch the video, and then Amanda and I will talk about what we're hearing and think about different ways to incorporate community into this. So we have given a proposal of, here are some ways it could work, knowing that there would be conversation, because that's what you are here to do, is talk and lead. So we are here and we're hearing different ways that community could be involved or not involved, and so we'll sift through the different pieces and come up with a couple alternatives that we can bring back. And Chris and I will definitely be talking, because we will together determine who will be on the planning team. And as Chris had mentioned, if you could speak to him directly about your interest on being on the planning team, it's a 6-month commitment. Amanda mentioned a 1-hour meeting a month, so that's 6 hours, and then emails back and forth and such. And then we would probably
You
add
think the planning
some.
team would be 1 hour a month?
Right,
That's
plus
the in-person
in-meeting.
meetings.
And then there are going to be the follow-up readings. And
There's homework.
There's homework.
There's homework.
Exactly. And coming to like the community leaders breakfast and things like
Right.
that. So a 1-hour meeting commitment, then the other time. So, and you and I had talked today that there is a job description, basically?
Yes, terms of reference for the planning team. So if you're interested but want to know more, I should have something later this week or early next week to give you more detail and description about expectations.
I would say that my invitation to board members to approach me, you might also suggest, I don't know the staff well enough to say I want certain people. If you have had dealings with the staff and you think they're really foresightful, I think it would be good for me to share those, or for you to share those with me too. So Celeste and I can talk about, well, Joe Blow, I've heard some concerns about, and so let's not use him, and that kind of thing. So give me, if you know of staff that you think we ought to include, and if you yourself would like, but I think the biggest thing is time commitment. Jeff?
Okay, so I've been in a bunch of these, and I too am like, weary of the same sorts of things. So I made some notes here, and I will write them up. But I just wanted to get them on the record. So you've had experience doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're experienced, you become pretty cavalier about throwing terms around and SWOT analysis and this and that. It's like I still do not have in my dim brain a really good feeling for the difference between a vision and a mission. And I've been to one just a month ago, and everybody said, well, now, what was the mission and what was the vision? So I think you have to be conscious of it's not just terms, it's like maybe you need to come up with different words so people don't have to worry about
Sure.
reminding themselves.
And let me just interject there and say, I have a great process using some worksheets that have very clear, simple, broken down language that will help us develop those
But
statements.
sometimes the group buys into this whole system of like, oh yeah, that vision, my mission, and it's
Sure.
like that you're isolating people that are outside,
Yes.
never mind the community and stuff.
Sure.
And it's the same with acronyms, SWAT, and what was the other one you mentioned? You know, I mean, like,
Yeah.
well, but libraries are rife with that stuff, and not every, and the schools are the same way. All the teachers talk in, you know, acronyms, and it's like,
Right.
you know.
And I apologize, it should be all.
Oh, no,
spelled out
I'm
in
not
the
criticizing. I'm
proposal.
just saying that, like, if we look at the process, I think we should be, I don't think it's a waste of time to really think the process out before we launch into this, because everybody goes down the primrose path and starts saying all these terms, and they know what they're talking about.
Right.
But it pushes regular people to the side. Another area that I'm very interested in are best practices. So why should we, like, reinvent the wheel? Is there a part of this that would say, let's see what other libraries of the same size do, or how they do the process, or the kinds of things that they've come up with?
Yeah, so the performance imperatives that are linked in there too
Okay.
are best practices for high-performing nonprofits. It's not library specific, but I
Okay.
think they apply, and so we'll definitely cross-reference against those as we go
Well,
through.
it's just, you know, the businesses that I've been in, you always like, well, wonder what everybody in the Big
Yeah,
Ten's doing, you know,
for
and it's
sure.
like, well, that's not very scientific, you know, I mean, like, no, but, you know, you kind of get into these cute
Yes.
pro forma ways of monitoring yourself. And so, and I think the worst part of this is the community survey. I was on the Arts Commission. Well, we held meetings, nobody came. Check the box. We did our community input. We did our open house, you know. These are the comments that we got, all 55 of them. Well, you know, that represents the community. No, that represents the people that showed up and that
Yes.
thought to talk and stuff like that. So this whole community thing is the most, I think, the most
Absolutely.
critical part of it. And kind of like what Barbara was saying, why does that necessarily, I mean, maybe you do need somebody on the board to, or on the committee, on the group to represent the community, but that should not be the only input. The community is like maybe a separate thing, and it could have a life of its own beyond this
Sure.
planning thing, you know. But the trick to get out there, get people connected, find the thought leaders and the, you know, whatever the Park District called them, that's like a critical thing. Because the presumption is, well, they didn't show up to the meeting, you know, nobody gave a response, they didn't fill the survey, and so their thoughts are just
Right.
not part of the equation.
Let me also say that for the library surveys that I've done in the last 2 years, we have not had any difficulty getting people to respond to surveys.
But which people and how many, you know, I mean, like, it
Lots.
really bothers me that the kids from my school, I never see them at the farmer's market. I never see any kid from my school at the farmer's market. Why is that? You know, like, I'm not saying, you know, but certain communities are pieces of the community. The community is not one. It's all sorts of things. And there are pockets in this community that just
Yes.
could float off into the distance, and you'd say, well, you know, we surveyed them and they just didn't respond, or they didn't show up, or whatever. I'm just saying that community thing is a really tough thing to get at. And the other final thing was that I think it's really important to have part of the cycle be something where everybody like puts their pens down, sets back and go, okay, have we gone too far afield? You know, like, let's look at the process. Well, we did the community surveys, well, and then let's talk about, were they any good? Well, how many do we get? What about these areas? Play the devil's advocate stuff in the process, not just sort of do it
At the end.
again, you know, at the end or the beginning and forget about it and stuff. So it's almost like doing the process properly is more important than the results that you come up with, I think. Okay, sorry. That's
We
it.
agree that the process is critical, and that's why the team will be reflecting back and then reporting out. So you receive the data from whatever groups, however, with staff as a group, for example. So if you have 85 employees and only 20 provide a survey, that's not a real representation of the staff as a whole. So we will be looking at the pieces and parts and seeing, did you reach out to these particular parts of the community? So there's the neighborhood listservs. We, of course, reached out to Huna and Suna and Wuna and the Northwest, I mean, the different wards and see. We will reach out to city council people because we want to make sure that we are reaching out to the whole community. And so we are on the same page. We want to make sure it's representative. And again, that's part of the check-ins that the planning team will have is, how did we reach out? What did we get back? And then reflecting with each other, how are we interpreting the data? And then we'll bring it to you and the community here so that we can make sure we feel like we're all on the same page. And we will invite people to come to the board meetings, which they are able to
I
do.
guess I'm just encouraging us to be that place that did it properly and not did it pro forma and just got through it and we did it in 6 months and everything's cool. And people go, oh my God, this is what they did. We can never find out what our community thinks because we didn't do this and look what they did.
Yeah.
Because they sat back and they said, you know, it didn't work. Let's try this, let's try this, let's try this. Because if of all of this stuff, finding out what the community, all those communities, what they think is the most important thing to knowing that you're serving those communities. But it's
Yeah.
very easy to sort of obliterate them and say, well, you know, we surveyed them. Now let's go talk about librarians and libraries and stuff, you know, I think.
Yeah. You know, we can also learn a lot from all these other planning
Oh, God.
processes that have happened in the community. There's a community needs report that's out there. Of course, we know the Park District has just undergone a process as well. So I think once we put out that we're doing this and reach out to other organizations, they're going to have a lot to share with us too.
Yeah, but we should, I mean, the stuff came back to the Park District should reflect what's coming back to us. If they're really taking the pulse of the community, we should find some similarities there.
Sure.
We could maybe borrow some names from them, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
Who did they,
who they thought?
who were their thought leaders?
Actual people.
Actually, we met with the parks, the library, Cranert, Public Arts, the schools met today to talk about programming and how we work together and how we can support each other.
So my experience at the Arts Commission was that the bureaucracy of the city, the planning department, they sort of said, here's the process we're going to do. And they, you know, well, we set up these meetings, we set up this input. How many people came? Well, 3 people came, you know, but we checked that box, we checked that box, we checked that box. And the results were just like pathetic, you know, and they were doing a professional job because they had to get through the day and they had things to do and all that sort of stuff. And I don't want to do that. I want to do something real.
I think we're 100% on the same page. No one here is, no more people, I mean, Shalini was here a little bit ago, who's on staff, who's interested in library management. So she came to see part of the board meeting. No one is here to do this to check a box. The 6 month is, again, a time frame, moves us ahead at a good pace so that we can start implementing a plan. But as Amanda said right up front, as we go, if we need to adjust it because some parts need more time, then we're going to adjust it to get the time in that we need.
Just like Barbara or somebody said, we've all been there and we check the boxes. We check the boxes and then the last box we check is put it in the file.
Yep.
And forget about it.
And it's there for the next 3 years.
And the university's just the worst at
I was just going to say, that's
how
what I
many,
think
you know,
was-
let's have a
oh, God.
vice chancellor for strategic planning.
Maybe
you know,
it's
like,
gotten
I mean,
better. Let's be positive. Has it gotten better, Beth? Oh, never mind.
Never mind.
Yeah, no comment. But
retired too long.
what I'm hearing is that it's very nice commentary, Jeff, and just as a reminder, but what I'm hearing is because we are so interested in checking boxes, that it's in our hands to not have our process be a box checking one. So with that, I think I'm less concerned about that happening because we have some very vigilant people. We have an experienced facilitator, and we want to rock this thing. We really do.
Well, seriously, I'm not
Yeah.
like just.
No, I know. No, that's what I'm saying. It's all good points. But I think, you know,
I want us to
good
do
notes,
such a
Jordan.
good job, they want us
Right.
to present it in Budapest or wherever.
Right. So I think let's just.
At ILA.
Let's follow the steps. Let's get on with it.
Illinois Library Association, I'm sorry.
And I actually did present doing one-page strategic planning at 4 different library associations this year, so I'm happy to share those slides with anybody too.
No, I mean, I want us to do I mean, you go and report, here's what we did, and, you know, that it was the best.
And just, I would really like to be able to access these 3 items. I think I've read the 5th discipline years ago, but you know, I like the more
We've got them on order.
the more stuff.
Oh,
that I
good.
could-
Yeah.
Yeah. I read Senge, we use Senge,
Sure.
actually at the university, but
Me and this guy were in charge of quality management, you know, with Deming, the guy that went to Japan and changed their whole, and so we were going to change the whole university. We did seminars, and we did, you know, and all these experiments and stuff, and then at some point, whoever just lost interest in it all, just drifted away. But it was like really cool stuff, but
Yeah.
you got to have that commitment, that long-term commitment, not just 6 months and get it done and put it in the drawer.
If we were hard on you, I'm sorry.
Not at all.
But we-
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Very, very good.
Thank you, Amanda.
Yeah, encouraging.
Yes, Celeste, you have a departmental structure thing.
I sure do. I will pull up my PowerPoint. So one of the things that the board has expressed interest in is learning more about how do the departments work together. So what are the departments? How do they work together? And then let's talk about training and professional development. So we'll do that. I've given you all copies of the tiny org chart, and it's tiny because we have, well, there's a lot of stuff happening in the library. So what I thought I would do is quickly, but thoroughly walk through the chart. At the very top is the community. We are all here to serve the community. You, the Board of Trustees, represent the community. I serve you above the community, and then I'm here to serve the staff. If you look to the far left, it says Associate Director, and that is Dawn Cassidy. They're one of her. If you look to the far, I'm going to actually stand up right here, this is easier for me. So I hope it's easier for you too. If you're looking over here on your chart, you have met Drew Kenton. He came last month. He is our new IT manager. Drew supervises the IT staff, which currently, and I would be happy to send you all this information. We have one full-time employee and one hourly employee in IT. So between the three gentlemen, they do all the IT work for the library. So 2 full-time and 1 hourly employee. Also reporting to Dawn is Brian Robertson, our acquisitions manager. Acquisitions is responsible for getting the items into the computers so that we can have those on-order item records and you can place your holds early. They stamp and sticker the items that come in as they come in the door. And when items are being withdrawn, well, actually they try to fix items first. So we have a machine that can buff out the CDs and the DVDs and then and fix the books that get torn. And when we determine that the items are no longer able to be circulated or shouldn't be circulated because they're too old, they withdraw them. They regularly have volunteers who help them. We have people from an institution that give people some workforce training, so there's a volunteer from that once a week at least, and then other community volunteers sometimes help with the withdrawal of materials or stamping and stickering, depending. As far as acquisition staff go, they touch all the items that come in and go out. They have a half of a full-time person who splits his time with acquisitions and administration. He's a clerk. He spends a little bit more time there, but for our purposes, half-time. We have 1 full-time cataloger, 1 part-time cataloger, and 4 hourly employees. They're very efficient with their time.
2
So we
full-time.
have the manager, we have a half-time person who does the billing part of it and the magazines and things like that, checks in the boxes, and then a full-time employee, a part-time employee, and 4 hourly employees. So Dawn, again, supervises them. Dawn is directly responsible for the circulation clerks who work at the checkout desk, who issue cards, take fines, check out items to you. There are 4 full-time, 3 part-time, and 9 hourly staff there. Now, on any given day, this number could change. So for example, we have a job posting out for 2 librarians. So that changes. People, the semester turns over, we hire new people, people move on. But today, this is what our numbers are. Eleanor is our manager of circulation, cafe, and volunteers. She supervises the shelf of baristas. In addition to shelving the items, putting them in order on the carts, pulling the holds, pulling items for, looking for missing items. They also do room setup, and they are baristas as well. So they run the cafe for us. And we have 24 hourly employees, and she supervises the volunteers. She does orientation for all the volunteers as they come in, and then they are directed to the appropriate department. So if they're doing work in children's, Eleanor will orient them, and then they go work with Rachel and her colleagues in youth services or with acquisitions or wherever else. Dawn is directly responsible for HR pieces that are, when we talk to the city HR department about whether it's extra training, whether a law has changed about how to handle a certain issue, or whether there are certain performance issues that we need some help with. So we talk to them for half a week. Dawn talks to them for half an hour a week. Again, sometimes very specific staff issues and sometimes bigger picture issues to keep abreast in the field. So this is the scope of Dawn's work and the colleagues she works with directly.
So Dawn really has HR. I mean,
Dawn is responsible for parts of HR. Becky is responsible for benefits
okay, yeah.
and some of those kinds of pieces. So depending on how each institution handles HR, this is how we shift the responsibilities. So Amanda is the development of director and promotion. And currently she supervises Jenny, who's our full-time website and graphic designer. And we have in the budget to hire an hourly employee to help out with development and promotion. And Jenny and Amanda have been working on what the needs are that we have for a person in this position, because this would be a new position for us. So we will look to hire someone later sometime this fiscal year. I'm gonna flip around, just ignore. I'm not trying to be rude, I'm just trying not to be blinded. The Director of Adult and Youth Services is Rachel. She supervises the librarians, information assistants, practicum students, interns, and apprentices, as well as volunteers, but mostly you supervise your staff who supervise the volunteers. Over here we have Lauren, who Chris just met the other day. You might have seen around. Lauren is our new manager of programming and outreach. She is a librarian, and she supervises the process of programming all the programs that the library does, whether they're with adult and youth services staff, whether they're with Champaign County Historical Archives, or whether like with circulation where we do the Market at the Square and other types of outreach. Lauren's responsible for overseeing all that. She doesn't do all the work, she oversees the process. She's going to be the one looking at which programs are popular, which programs are not as popular. When someone says, can you come to our school, she'll be the one to field the calls and make sure that the programming and outreach happens seamlessly. And there's only one of her. Adult and Youth Services staff, we have 6 full-time people, 5 part-time people, 14 hourly people, and 2 full-time librarian positions posted with a application deadline of January 1st. And we were excited to see our candidate pool there. Of the 14 hourly employees, we have 4 students, again, between the practicums, interns, and apprentices. You know Anka, she's the Director of Archives and Special Collections, including the Champaign County Historical Archives. She's also responsible for facilities. So she has archive staff, and in the archive staff, they have 2 full-time librarians, 7 hourly staff, and then 3 students are part of the hourly staff. Anka is herself directly responsible for facilities, and she works very closely with Becky on who's going to call Presto X to say it's time to pick up the dead mouse in the truck, or, well, it's a thing. Occasionally. Anka has been spearheading the projects, of course, with the chiller, with the furnace across the street, with the porch, and working directly with the companies who are overseeing that, and been doing a really fabulous job. Becky is our office manager. She does work with the board, as you are well aware, over the years. She is the secretary who prepares the meeting minutes. She does the agendas and all those pieces and parts. She does the benefits, and basically Jack or Jill of all trades. Everybody needs something from Becky all the time because Becky knows everything and has been here over 40 years. Administration staff, right now that is Matthew, who is the person that also works part-time in acquisitions. And for us, he does all the data entry of the invoices as all our bills come in. He puts them into that new Munis system. And so he works three-quarter time in acquisitions and like 1/4 time with us, or 2/3, 1/3.
Did you say 1/4 there for?
It's more like 1/3, 2/3. I said that wrong before.
Okay.
And then finance and security, those are 2 things that I'm directly responsible for. So I've got finance and security, Dawn has HR, Anka has facilities, Rachel has all of adult and youth services. There's a lot of sharing that goes on with a number of things. And what I asked Rachel to do is talk about a couple of ways you can look at, these look like little silos and little boxes, but we're all people who work together. And we spent some time really looking at how we all assist each other in serving the public, and Rachel's going to give you a couple examples of those.
Sure. So I thought a couple of examples that would be helpful would be things that our patrons interact with, so collections and programs. A good example of how we work together to bring things to the public with new collections are that the AYS librarian or librarians are working to develop the collections. They're selecting the items that will be part of those collections. They are working with me on getting that going, and we partner with the acquisitions staff. Acquisitions takes care of the packaging. How are we going to safely circulate a sewing machine? How are we going to make sure that the telescope is not damaged in transit? And then also, how are we going to catalog it so that it's easy for folks to find new collections, because they are non-traditional or unusual items, require some intensive original cataloging, particularly if they have lots of parts and pieces. What happens if the lens breaks? How much is that particular piece? And so they put a lot of hard work in with the librarians about itemizing those pieces so that when the public maybe has an item break or has a piece that is returned missing, we can quickly get that item back out into circulation. When it comes to new collections, we're also partnering with circulation, because we do have to figure out, okay, when the item comes in, what do we need to check for? What do we need to, if it's an electronic item, do to make sure that it's cleaned up for the next person so that the data is not moved over from one place to the next. And then finally, we're working with development and promotion. Jenny is our graphic designer, so she would design tags for the new collection, get content up on the website that the AYS librarians are creating the copy for, and then social media as well to make sure that our community knows we have these great things. This is wonderful. So that's a good example from collection. A good example from programs would be the recent program that we did as part of the CU Folk and Roots Festival. So that was us partnering as AYS Programming and Outreach with CU Folk and Roots, so we're working with community partners. Our shelvers, of course, because that's a large event, have to set up and tear down for the day. They're also adjusting their cafe staffing during that time because we expect increased orders. Development and promotion is sharing the information and working with our community partners to make sure that people know that we are part of the event and we are also free. And Archives is part of the CU Folk and Roots Festival because they put on an Archives Bazaar at the same time. So lots of people working all together to make sure that these items and experiences for the public go well.
Nice example.
So the next piece you had wanted to learn more about is training and development. So money is not what it's all about, but I want to show you that we have a financial commitment over a period of years to this. This does not include, of course, the time that goes into the different staff meetings. Each department chooses how they want to have their staff meetings, so acquisition sometimes huddles up. They're all in one place. Thursdays, everyone's there, and they will have their meetings sometimes impromptu. Rachel has an adult services team, adult and teen. She's got a children's team, and then she has team meetings for the entire staff. So again, different departments do it different ways, and they do meet on regular bases. We also do performance evaluations. That is very time intensive. We do them between 1 and 2 years, depending on how the other cycle events that are happening around the library and when it makes sense to pull things together. We have people go to conferences, they attend webinars, and do one-day events as well. So you notice a peak in 2019. We paid $6,000 to have professional training by the Polaris organization. Polaris is what our card catalog is. And we are moving to an acquisitions module, which will streamline the work of the acquisitions department and adult use services in ordering. It will help people understand more about where their budgeting is because it shows encumbrances, and Munis shows when it has come in. And so people wanted more control over how they can see their budgets. And so this is something that staff had wanted for a while, but we weren't able to take the time, and everyone could make the time to do it. And so we had the professional trainer come out, but in case you're wondering, what? That is why this year is about $6,000 more. We do a lot of peer-to-peer training. We know that our colleagues, have varied interests and skills and are actually eager to share with one another. So it's really important to us that they have the time to work with each other and train and learn from each other. So this is part of what we do and how we do it. The Teen Open Lab is a great example of this. Staff and teens learn from each other. It's a main tenet, which I think is spelled wrong there. But when we have new staff and new interns from the library school come through, again, staff show you how to use the 3D printer as well as how we interact with the teens. What is the vibe supposed to be? We are not here to direct the teens what to do. We're here to learn and help them facilitate their journeys to what they want to do in here. And so sometimes when we train each other, it's about checking a box. Do you know how to turn on the 3D printer? Yes or no? But how do you work with a teen that wants to sew a dress that doesn't know how to sew anything?
That's not checking a box, that's about helping people work through an experience and how to make sure that the patrons are having a good experience. So that is one example of peer-to-peer training. We have a staff training that has different checklists, so we make sure people have consistent experiences, and we line people up with people who enjoy the training possibilities, so we all learn from each other. And when you train a new person, it helps you get a little bit more reinvigorated with your own work and reminds you of things that you could be doing differently or what works really well. So you can have conversations on the staff, like I do it this way. And that may be a good way that maybe all people should try a certain thing. So orientation and training is helpful. We look for different ways to give people training for what they need. We want people to have the tools they need to do their job. So one thing we've heard recently, Rachel has had feedback that people would like some more information on some finer points of being a notary public. And a number of our staff are notary publics, so that we can offer that service all the hours that we're open. And so Rachel and her colleagues found a webinar for this. And in talking through it with the staff to get their feedback, we weren't sure actually if the webinar was going to answer the questions. So one person said, I will volunteer to do this webinar, and either A, I can train people when I'm done, or B, everyone can do the webinar independently. It's not something you can do all at once in a group. And so someone has volunteered to, again, be the learner on behalf of the group, and then we can go from there and decide what type of training is most appropriate, because if it doesn't answer the questions that people have, it's not worth the time, let alone the money. But people's time is important. We want to feel when they get training, it's what they're looking for. Another thing that I want to mention is that part of this peer-to-peer training and checklists and manuals, they're developed by staff, because I don't do the work in the departments. Rachel does some of the work, but we really rely on our colleagues to pull together this information so we can be consistent across departments, but to make sure it is staff-driven, because again, they're on the front lines. And Lauren Chambers, who's our new, I'm going to point to the org chart that's no longer there, the new department manager, she was selected to go to Illinois Library Association's Elevate program for leadership, and you had to bring a project that you're working on. One of her projects was a training manual and information for the Adult News Services Department.
Who's doing that?
Lauren Chambers did. So she went back in the spring. And so the call just came out, do you want to send more people to Elevate next year? Send it to the management team, and I've already had one person say, yes, I would like to apply. So we like to share these opportunities so people can learn, and then again benefits us and our patrons, because better trained staff are able to do their job in a different way than not as well trained staff. This is an example of our in-service agenda. We spent time last year and do spend time every year giving library updates from each department so that there's a report out to the whole staff. We don't get all 85 people, but we get at least 75 every year. And so everyone's on the same page at that moment as to what has happened and what will be happening in the different departments, so we can see ourselves as the whole that we are. There are a lot of different pieces in there. I just want to point out that some of the things that we do in staff day can be boring, but sometimes we are responding to changes in state law. So we talked about sexual harassment and how not to do that, and what happens if you see it, what happens if you experience, and please don't do it. We had people come on trending topics like opioid overdoses. So an overview of what can happen in the community first, and then
please have your attention. The Urbana Free Library will close in 30 minutes. Patrons who wish to apply for or renew library cards should come to the circulation desk in the next 15 minutes.
So for people that wanted more, we had special training on what to do if there is an overdose for the people that wanted that information. So we do have staff who trained who, if someone needs Narcan administered, they could administer it if they chose to. No one is being forced to do that. So, and when we determine what Staff Day will be, we have a group of people, all the management teams working on it this year. And of course, one of the things we look at is feedback from last year, as well as things we've heard during this year, what people want to learn at Staff Day, what kind of experiences they want to have. So this is a list of different organizations that offer training opportunities that our staff have taken up. Illinois Library Association, different library associations, archive associations, HR associations, IHLS, the Illinois Heartland Library System. I thought everyone would know that acronym, but.
Do we have people in every one of those?
We've had people attend workshops or training days or even present at in all of these. And actually Anka, for the Midwest Archives Conference, Anka is up for president. She's on the ballot, she's on the slate right now. So fingers crossed.
And so I wanted to mention technology competencies, another example of a staff-driven training. We asked the technology team, which is was the manager IT MC and his team, and they looked at other libraries' best practices and training competencies. Then they looked at our library, took those and broke them out across all departments, because if you're in circulation, you have different things to do on the computer than you do if you're in the children's department or working in the teen open lab. So if anyone wants to see it, I have the whole 23-page checklist that one could complete if one did all the things. These are the tech competency, this is the scale. We ask people to grade themselves, assess their own skills in these different areas. And then nothing was held against you. This was purely a learning tool, so that when we did evaluations in 2017, you could have the conversation with your department director. And if you needed training, which was below a 3, so either basic or minimal knowledge, that we could get you the training you needed to do your job. And everyone that needed it got training. Most people were 3 and above, but for the people that needed more. And we found out, for example, many people didn't know how to use all the functions on the phone they thought they wanted to know. So we made sure that people learned those things. And we changed our orientation because it's helpful to know how to transfer and place on hold and all the things that you can do.
I really like that, to interrupt.
Please.
Instead of punishing somebody in their performance evaluation, make it comfortable and safe for them to say, I want to learn this. Good.
And it can be awkward, like 3 years later, I don't know how to do that thing on the phone. Well, we try to make it so that it isn't seen like a punishment, and we all can't remember all the things we need to know, but this also lays out the things we expect you to know so that you can touch base. And we covered in orientation, and then the supervisor touches base with the people later. So high level, some details, these are the kinds of things we do to make sure people have the training that they need and that we think they need, and time and financial commitment. But again, it's really a lot of expertise on the staff that we draw on, and we are excited to be able to provide as much training as we do. So thank you for allowing for $18,000 in this year's training budget so that we can do these things. Also, board training is involved, so if you want to go to the Illinois Library Association or IHLS conferences or things, let us know, because it's important that you have the tools you need as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for doing this.
You're welcome.
Really helpful.
This year.
We see the people, you know, and have them on a chart.
I just like what page now.
So is reference part of your ability? And then youth services is children's, I mean. And then how, like, I'm not nitpicking, but maybe I missed the explanation, but the circulation clerk staff goes directly to the associate director.
Dawn, yep.
But then we have somebody in charge of Circulation Cafe volunteer management who doesn't supervise the circulation clerk staff. Is that right?
Correct. Eleanor does not in Dawn's absence, Eleanor supervises the clerks. Otherwise, the clerks report directly to Dawn. Dawn started as she was the circulation manager. And so when she was promoted to be associate director, that was a role she wanted to keep. So we let her keep that role, and she's able to balance her responsibilities together. So we're happy for that.
It just seemed, if I didn't know what was going on, it would seem logical that if you have a manager of circulation, that they would supervise the circulation clerk staff. It just threw me a bit that it bypassed them.
Partly, Jeff, it was to make sure that people understood that the shelver baristas are part of circulation. So that is part of the reason that is in her title. And again, when Dawn's not there, she supervises the department. So she wears a couple of hats.
Other questions? If not, moving along, we have a workplace violence policy, which I did not find in my packet, but I think you have. Do you? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. We basically had one word stricken.
Yep.
And I think let me ask the person that proposed, you are happy with that?
I'm delighted with it, yes.
Me too.
Yeah. Is there a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Aye, thank you. Now, next month, we have the bylaws, which Jeff has been working very hard on. And did the board get this?
No, this still, I shared with you the working documents that we just received
Okay.
from so as a
I was going to talk about that, either Jeff or I could talk about that.
Jeff hasn't done anything on it. She's been doing all the work, and this person that is working with her, so I've received the emails, and that's about it.
There's 14 suggestions, and so far I think it's pretty sound. We're going to shorten them.
We'll look
Working
forward
with
to
the
seeing
library
them.
school
Yeah,
student,
when
as
they
we
come.
had talked about, having a library school student who works in the archives, who has an interest in public policy. So he did benchmarking, he looked at other libraries, out of state, in state, and compared our bylaws to theirs, as well as looked at what the requirements are in these different books that we need to follow, standards, recommendations, and such. So Jeff and I still need to meet about the data, as well as the recommendations and suggestions that the student made. So we will hope to bring you a draft for comment and discussion in January for a vote in February.
Great.
And do we also expect to have some kind of report on the block planning in January?
I'm going to get to that administrative report.
So, administrative report.
Go to the what?
Administrative report.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Administrative report. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I jumped the gun.
Okay, a quick request from Dawn. I'm not sure if everyone has turned in their per capita report saying that you read all the things. I will take those if Dawn was not able to make it here tonight. Or you can email them to her, whichever you prefer, but I'm happy to take them. So that is the first thing. We're looking for, we mentioned earlier, volunteers for the strategic planning team. I'm also looking for a board volunteer for the library block plan. We've got the updates done to the block plan that was developed before in 2013. And I'm working with the city to see if they have a city planner who can work with us. Some of the suggestions that were made before, there's been a changing landscape in the city and potential other projects. So long story short, it'd be great to have a city planner to work with a small team of people to review the documents before and then bring it to the board for a recommendation for approval as a guiding document. So if you are interested in that, please let Chris or me know. And these are a couple of different opportunities for the board to look at long-range planning for the library. So there will be some type of update in January. It won't be completed, but we will just be getting started as far as the team meeting. And then just as a note, a handful of times a year we see an ebb and flow in student behavior. So in spring, people get a little bit riled up. Before breaks, people get a little bit riled up. And our staff work tirelessly to provide a safe and comfortable environment for all patrons. Recently, we have seen an uptick in some of the behavior of kids after school, and it's been a little bit, the behavior's been worse than we've seen, and so just to let you know, as an informational piece, we do see ebbs and flows. We are acknowledging that this flow is a little bit more than we've seen, but we are working with staff as well as the patrons to help them succeed in the library or ask them not to come back for a period of time. To give them a break. And
Is this middle school kids?
middle school, high school,
I'm just kind of wondering if it's a spillover
School
from the
problem, too.
high school.
it could be.
And
Some
middle
of the
school.
teenagers are not in school. If you have a 19-year-old, that person will be out of school.
Okay.
So, and we
Not-
don't
so not
know all of the
necessarily.
ages.
Yeah.
But again, break is coming soon. But just to let you know, so some of our partners in this would be working with the school resource officer, working with the schools themselves to see if they have techniques they use when they're working with kids. We work with the police department. If we're banning someone for a period of time, then we file an official no trespass notice. So just so you know, this is an uptick. It will go back down in part due to our efforts and the efforts of our partners to make, again, a good space for everyone to be in. Most of the teens who come in here, of course, have a lovely, pleasant experience and don't cause any trouble, just like most of the adults who come in don't have any problems.
To give a positive example, my daughter happened to be up the second floor during the after-school rush, and she commented how impressed she was with the staff members that were circulating around, greeting, engaging patrons in conversations, and she just happened to be saying, wow, how effective is this?
Yeah.
And this is nice because it's friendly, but yet it's also setting a tone. And so she came and said, I never noticed that before. Boy, the libraries, they did a really good job. So I wanted to give you this. Might have been on a quieter afternoon, but she was struck enough by the effectiveness of this approach for that particular day that she came back and mentioned it to me. So I wanted to pass it along.
So There are things like the phases of the moon and the
Yeah.
closeness of this
We
and
see
that.
that,
But
yes.
there
Yeah,
is
it's-
something else going on. And it's happened over the last several years. There's been this uptick, and it's not going away. It won't necessarily just dissipate. And that's part of what the background of this schools thing is. And it's not a function of what they tried to do and all that, I think. But I mean, so it may appear that this will just ebb away, and it may not, though. That you may be dealing with a different character to their sense of respect and whatever. You may grit your teeth for a long time, and it still will be there.
Is there a good source for sort of statistics on that?
No, but I mean, like, we've all been trying to figure out why. I've been there like 14 years, and it was really manageable until 2 or 3 years ago. And people are coming up with things like grandmothers are dying off. Grandmothers used to keep things together. Most of these kids grew up with a black president. They're 8, 10 years old, and now all of a sudden, and it's not like they care, but their parents
Yeah.
funnel that stuff. Technology, I mean, the number of kids that play Grand Theft Auto and what's the new one, the
Gosh.
Fortnite.
Fortnite, thank you. Yeah,
I mean,
Fortnite, yeah.
like they're really
Highly
creepy
addictive.
things, you know, and I know everybody,
adults.
but there are things going on that have raised the level of disrespect in the schools, and some of the school districts' attempts to deal with it haven't been successful. But you shouldn't, you're not imagining things if you're dealing with board.
No.
And could I just say, I would appreciate you bringing this up. I really do. And to let us know if it doesn't, I mean, I see it when I volunteer at the middle school. You know, about this time of year, they're bouncing off the walls, and then it'll get a little better. But, yeah, let us know, because I think Jeff is right. There's something going on, and also 2% of the kids in the schools are homeless now. I mean, I think there's some poverty things going on. There's a lot of stuff
I think
going
it's all
on.
about poverty, at least.
Pardon me?
I think it's almost all about poverty, how it iterates out and stuff. But they, remember, I always say a few years ago, it's probably 10 years ago, when the big issue around Urbana was, oh my God, we got all these kids coming in here and we don't know what to do, and it's like, and we don't want to be policemen. And then you've got the makerspace and all these kind of really creative things. Well, I think that's the more fruitful kind of thing, that there may be creative ways to deal with this that don't rely on discipline and all that other stuff that doesn't work.
So here's one thing we did. When we saw a lot of kids coming in, more kids than we were seeing before, and more than we can actually have working in here, we said, kids want to be in places, what are the places we can give them in a building that is built out? Like, there's not a lot of spaces. So over the past this year, we've been opening up the Satterthwaite Conference Room after school to people who want to use that space, because it seats 18 now. 18 teens after school is a lot of teens. But we can get, 10 in there comfortably, and most of the time, they do a fairly good job of just being with each other after school. Sometimes they do homework, sometimes they just want to talk with each other, sometimes they show each other their phone videos, and sometimes they're too loud and we have to remind them just to bring it down. Because when you can hear those kids up at the cafe, then they're too loud, right? So that was one thing that we've done, and that seemed to have worked fairly well. And when they're too loud or too disruptive or throwing each other against the wall because it's after school and they want to wrestle, then we tell them they need to leave the building
May
for
I
the
please
day.
have your attention?
So we talk that through, and then they come back the next day and they do a better job. So
minutes.
we've done
The
that. We
main elevator will
also,
close in
sorry,
10
just a
minutes.
second.
Patrons who need the elevator and all groups in the auditorium or conference room
That's you.
should return to the first floor now.
So working with Rachel and her team, we opened up the quiet McFarland Hood Room to group study and groups after school.
Yeah, that's good.
So that if people wanted to be in a place where they could talk and this room was full, they had another place where they could go. And we found that sometimes they use that, but sometimes when they heard about that, they weren't so sure, they would come down to the Teen Open Lab when they weren't coming down here before. So by opening up a new space where they could be and have a conversation, whereas here it can get louder and not as conversationally driven, it's more activity driven, they actually decided not to have the conversations and come down and get in the group activities. So we are trying different things because we know we don't have all the answers. And so we're going to talk to the kids, see what they want, see what we can provide, talk to staff, talk to schools, talk to the police, talk to different resources so we can be creative about our approaches. And we're going to keep being creative. But also working to provide a good environment for all people who want to be here. About 800 people come in a day. And, if a couple act out, in the big picture, if a handful of people act out on any given day, it can be disruptive to a lot of people. But the majority of people coming in the door, teens as well as non-teens, get along just fine here and really enjoy it.
And in the schools, the problem is that minority of kids is the tail that wags the dog for all the other kids, and that shouldn't be that way.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a chance for the library to do something creative that the schools feel their hands are tied on, it'd be cool.
Maybe in the strategic planning, I mean, actually, and I'm glad you're providing quiet space. I know at the middle school, the class I volunteer in, we take kids out and we take them to a quiet place because some kids just really hate all the noise, and it makes them act out. It makes them nuts. I mean, they just...
And we have the 2 study rooms upstairs too, which people can reserve just
gonna say
outside the elevator by the computer lab.
but
And
those
those
are
are well
small.
utilized as well.
Yeah.
So,
Good.
and that is the report that I have.
The update on the shelving in front of the desk, you want to tell us about that? Where are we and what's more is going to happen there?
We have about 30,000 items behind the checkout desk between DVDs and CDs, and this year the project is working on getting the DVDs out onto the floor. The CDs are a whole separate project that we have not addressed yet. But acquisition staff are working with Adult and Youth Services staff, and they're making them floor ready, which involves changing the cases and then changing the cataloging so it says like DVD anime versus just 67592. They're in shelf list order behind the desk by number. So it's a very quick system as far as shelving and pulling, but it's not very user-friendly. So we're making sure that when they go on the shelf, they've got spine labels like the books, like the kids' DVDs, and like the nonfiction DVDs, so you can find them more easily. And so as the items hit the shelves, we take the plastic out of the plastic books. The plastic books will get smaller, they'll be able to go away, there'll be more floor space available.
That was my next question. Is there going to be more floor space that we can put some seating chairs in there?
Eventually, yes, but it's going to take a moment. And I can't tell you how long it's going to
Yeah.
take because it's a lot of items, and it will take some time. So, but that is the plan. So,
And I hope you noticed the runner. You want to say anything about the runner?
races. Yeah, the sculpture on the corner. I hope you like it. It's here for 2
Love
years
it.
through the public,
Love it.
the sculpture, Urbana Sculpture Project. We are delighted. They're working with the city, and the city is working with the marathon because there's different ways we can cross-promote. Maybe we'll have a water station here, maybe a music station, selfies. So we're absolutely thrilled. And I'll be speaking to the Public Arts and Culture Commission next month to thank them for all the different kinds of public art opportunities we've had here at the library through their...
And how's the porch going, if I may?
Oh, yeah. Good.
It's coming along quite nicely. We're just hoping for some warmer days so we can pour concrete or cement, whatever is the more generic term.
Are they going to meet the December deadline? Well,
It depends, yeah.
it didn't look like it.
We would rather they do it right and take a little
Yes,
bit longer.
Oh, definitely.
But it is moving along at a nice pace. And the furnace is in at the building across the street, so whenever we get a tenant, they can actually move in.
Yeah.
Any other questions of Celeste? I see no other business to come before the group. Does anybody have anything? If not, yes.
If anybody happens to read the New Yorker the last week or two ago, there's a little article, an old story by Frank McCourt, in which the library is really the hero of that story. So just for inspiration.
Okay. I declare this meeting adjourned.